way. The struggle is real when it comes to approaching God. And superhero narratives dive into this, and like Batman is a perfect example.
How so? I'm with you, but I'd like to hear.
Well, he comes from a tragic past. His parents get killed in front of him, and he's got a lot of darkness, but
Mhm.
he channels that energy to um, save the city. To fight off evil.
Mhm. Oh yeah, which I think is actually I'm really glad you brought that up because um, this is kind of a random aside. I may have mentioned this before, but one of my theories is that like one of the ways the devil has sort of like tricked us in the modern age is that he doesn't use the image of like horns and like the bull as much because people know about that. They know that's the devil. I think what he uses is like the clown. And like the person who invented and like popularized the clown is a guy named Joseph Grimaldi, and he claims to have been inspired by Hindu depictions of demons. And so I think like clowns are demons, and so like the Joker like is like a demon, and then like the Batman represents like like a follower of good. I don't know, maybe it's like too. It's not that serious, but I honestly
Yeah.
I do really believe
Have you heard of the kabuki, or the masks that the samurai wear in Japan? They're essentially masks of onis, or demons in
Oh
Japanese mythology.
yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Um, so you find this a lot, and you even find this in the symbolism of the Bible as well.
Mhm.
This, um, going through and utilizing the powers of chaos, transforming them and bringing them into order in order to be transformed spiritually.
Yeah, because I think of that maybe. I mean, you'll say this. I don't know. I mean, I think this is probably one of my biggest struggles, just with faith and in general. I guess is like my mind and just the not like my mind, but like the way I look at the mind and like understanding and like all this stuff. Because I think it does lead me to a lot of like chaos and that like weird duality of like God being someone who both like puts order to the chaos, and that like order is both understanding, and that understanding is both like information, and information is complexity, and then that's chaos. But then chaos becomes order. I don't even know. So this is where I'm like, it gets all like, um, but
Yeah, you have the ability to formulate meaning, from your environment, right? So, and a lot of this has to do with attention. So you pay attention to something that's going on in your mind, like all the sea of chaos of information that's going on, passing through your mind, but you have the ability to go in there and formulate something orderly, and make sense out of it, and derive meaning from it. And you can follow a train of thought. You can read a book, you can, search a bunch of websites. You can get on down a rabbit hole of a train of thought and learn a lot just by following that train. And the same thing goes within, the capacity of attention itself. Your mind is a sea of information, but you have the ability to follow a train within it, and you know basically extract order out of chaos. That's a beautiful thing. That's a God-given talent that God gave us, the ability to do that.
oh, yeah, dude, yeah, dude, yeah. See, because dude, and like honestly, even though I do kind of argue from this like kind of Vedic perspective a lot. Honestly, a little bit of the reasons I do that is because like in my head I'm like Hegel is the greatest philosopher. Hegel is Christian, so the Christians have to have the best argument, and then they're going to be able to school me on all this. Like, but I don't know if that's like I don't know, maybe I'll have some misunderstanding. But like this idea of like putting order to chaos is such a beautiful idea to me, and I think the Hindus try to get at it, and that's kind of like what the message of like the Bhagavad Gita is a little bit. It's like you have to tie up all your karma, you have to go into battle, you have to go into this chaos, this war, and you have to try to like sort things out. And I guess in my own life, I don't know. I kind of sometimes I think like I look at like the people around me, and like I kind of like look at my family and some of the people in my community, um, and I think like, wow, like I guess like I don't know, this is something we all go through, but dealing with that thought of that like I can only control myself, and because I have to control myself, I have almost like a responsibility um to like I can't control the chaos, right? But to do my part to try to like keep peace and I guess like balance, because sometimes I do think I'm like not like I guess in my like evil and like incorrect thoughts, and I think I do have like arguments against these. I'll get twisted and I'll be like, why are things so chaotic? Why is everything so crazy? Like God must love chaos. God must love this stuff. But then I'm like, no, that's like his perfect plan because it all is ordered. Like it all does have a plan. Um, but like God doesn't like that's like a temptation. God doesn't want you to like see all the chaos of the people around you and just be like, yeah, I'm just gonna add to this. That's like literally what the Joker does, ironically. He's like, chaos. He's like, there's already so much chaos. What is a little more hurt, right? But it's like, no, screw that. Batman is the only one in Gotham City, and he does it anyway. That's like a hero. I don't know. I was like, that's like an awe. And then like we were like, that's like a gift God gives you. That is such an awesome idea to me because I'm like, yeah, like it's like to think like if you I do think people can do that, but when they do that, like if you're able to like it is part of you like not sinning, but if you're able to sort of like order yourself properly and like live a proper life and have like balance with the things around you, I think what you're doing is you're interacting with something. You're participating in something. And like I think you would like what you're saying, that's a gift of God. You're participating in a gift of God. You're participating in a miracle. And so to think that like you are the one who's like ordered this, it's like it's a pretentiousness in and of itself. But
Exactly.
but that's not to say that that's not something we're actually called upon to participate in. And so it's like, boom, that's the. I'm like, yes, dude, that's awesome. It's like, thank you for saying that.
Exactly, man. Yeah. Like in Matthew chapter 11, he says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly of heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." So all of that effort that we're trying to put into our own salvation, our own effort, our own desire to achieve enlightenment, or whatever one's own goals may be, Christ is telling us to put all of our labor upon Him. Um, he's going to carry it for us, and that's the beautiful thing about Christianity, is that it's literally not of our own effort. Now, it's not to say that we don't have our own effort. We certainly do. And the ascetic life, this is kind of a paradox, because the ascetic life in Orthodox Christianity is very much about individual daily effort, like maintaining the quality of your thoughts and whatnot. And he's muted and silenced. So I'll stop right there.
What
Mr.
happened?
Z.
Huh?
Yeah. What
What's
happened?
up? I was just watching some YouTube video.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
also
what
forgive me. I just had to take a call. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just want to say that.
happened?
No worries. Come to me, all you who are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. So the yoke is put on Christ. Everything is not of our own effort, is what I was saying.
Right, and then you sort of say, but this is a bit of an paradox because the ascetic life is like very hard, but still this like actually works like in cohesion. And then that's I apologize, like my mother called me. I didn't say that right.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Mm.
that's the paradox. Ascetic life requires a great deal of attention in any given moment, but
And and let's not many people confuse asceticism with stoicism.
Oh yeah, totally
Asceticism,
different.
there's joy in asceticism. Stoicism, there's no joy.
Ye- Yeah, and I'm pretty sure the Stoics don't. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure the Stoics don't believe in a soul. I think they
I
believe in
don't
like a
know.
total monism, and they think
Marcus
the whole universe.
Aurelius, the famous one, right? It's great to be a Stoic when you have everything, when you live in Caesar's palace. But when someone is doing something with your wife, as a Stoic, you get jealous and you get the guy murdered. So much for being a Stoic.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of one of the ideas that I think Christians kind of respond to Stoicism with is that Stoicism almost has this like false conception that you can sort of like order yourself perfectly, and then like nothing outside you will affect you. That like if you're just totally good within yourself, nothing exteriorly. And there's a sense in which like maybe a little bit something like that is both kind of true and a good uh ambition, but there's also a degree to which it's like well I mean, like, so, like Aristotle and like the Christian fathers both talk about this. So, like the Christian teachers talk about like a heavy heart. They're like it's actually good and proper to be somewhat, in a controlled sense at least, like affected by the sorrows of the earth and like the suffering of other people. If you weren't affected by that, there would be something actually wrong with you. But the Stoics actually propose this as like a type of goal that you almost want to be this almost like sociopathic, like just rock of like a human, right? And even more so, it also proposes a little bit that you could sort of perfect yourself um, in like a total sense, and that like the way you do that is like perfecting yourself. But I think like one of my favorite responses to that is like Aristotle's take in like Nicomachean Ethics, which has like inspired like many both Christians, Jewish, and like Islamic writers for like thousands of years after. But um, he basically says like you're always going to be kind of imperfect, and then that's totally rational. And so really, what it's about doing is it's about like trying to minimize that imperfection in the smartest way possible while still recognizing it's going to be there, right? So you might say like I'm something. So this is like an Aristotelian golden mean like line. So he might say something like, "Okay, well, you're never going to be able to describe your own intelligence perfectly, right? So maybe like you could describe yourself as more intelligent than you are. Maybe you could describe yourself as less intelligent than you are, right? These are both going to be wrong, okay? But assuming you're never going to be perfect, he's going to say, well, what's the better of the two options? The better of the two options is to be humble. That's more virtuous. It's more virtue. If you know you're going to be wrong, it's more virtuous to be like, I'm going to edge on the side of like, maybe I'm not as intelligent, right? Rather than like, I'm going to edge on the side of like, I'm more intelligent because that would be prideful, right? So that's going to be a way in which like the Stoic would say like, just like don't say anything or just like be like just figure out your intelligence exactly and then just know that and it doesn't matter what like other people think and like screw like if you're just good with yourself you don't need to worry about like representing yourself to other people. But Aristotle's gonna like in the, like some of these early Christian writers are gonna say like um no like you first off you want to be affected by the world a little bit. Secondly, you're always going to be a little bit imperfect, but understanding that is actually an important step in the like process to virtue. um and yeah, I'm just gonna sorry, yeah.
I like that very much. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
like. Sorry, go ahead.
Aristotle is on the right path there.
I think I must. I like to think simple. We're just in us. We're just trying to build, let's say some kind of world or maybe city. And well, first let's maybe create a sewage system, an efficient one. Maybe let's build some aqueducts. Let's build I don't know, some kind of structures around, and then advance and so on and so forth. And at the same time, maintain what is being built. I'm not trying to seek what my limits are. I'm trying to I'm trying to just build of what I have, what I was given, and thankful for that, and build of this material. And perhaps I'll be given more, or perhaps it will be taken away. Some things will be taken away, and it fluctuates. But hopefully, it just builds up, it maintains, and the process is like cyclically goes over and over, and something perhaps beautiful is created, and never-endingly it just keeps on progressing this way. And the limit that I thought I had, perhaps that limit, I was wrong about it. I shouldn't even think about a limit.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, at first I was going to say, actually, I wasn't sure if I was tracking what you're saying, and I actually still don't think I am, so forgive me if I'm misunderstanding what you're saying. Um, but are you saying because of the like building a city, building one's own life, recognizing the necessary imperfection we have as like creatures of flesh, what that actually means is that to in order to reach perfection, there's a sort of like infinite journey, and it because you're necessarily imperfect, it means that there's actually infinite growth. I think that's like that is it because that's
Yeah,
beautiful. So
there
okay,
it
that's
is. Look,
dude.
my road. There, people poop on my road. Maybe I should put some public toilets in
Dude,
my city.
that's actually so cool. You know, if I may say, actually, I don't know if you like mean it exactly like this, but if I under and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong because I think I may misremember this, but like various philosophers have used like infinity in their proof of God, and like I think that's like such a beautiful idea, especially like in the idea of imperfection. That's like specifically a kind of to me almost like a very Cartesian idea. Because like
Mathematician.
yeah, exactly. So you know Rene Descartes was like a G, like that dude was like an actual like genie. Like I love Descartes. He was like, but I believe he had an idea of something like he said that itself is proof of God because he said man inherently has contact with God and God is infinite. But
Yeah.
he said the mind is limited. So the fact that you just inherently have like like contact with the infinite conception of God within your limited mind is itself a miracle, and that's like proof of God or something like this. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
I that's
Like a little.
kind of like
There's like some kind of zero-dimensional point in us, and it's like within an onion with indefinite amount of layers,
mhm.
and you're trying to peel these layers and trying to reach that point, and that point is that little point within that onion that is like infinite amount of, I don't know, energy, you could say, and creativity and everything, and you're trying to peel and peel, and you're getting closer and closer to, but you don't even know how many layers there are,
Mhm.
and it's not even you peeling, but then you start to realize it's you peeling with God to reach God.
Mhm.
But when you're peeling these onion layers, these layers themselves are like the raw materials that you're using to build uh, things within you,
Mm.
and
Oh.
maintain
Mhm.
naturally.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's actually like really cool because yeah, like flipping that from the like seeing that as your own, like being that we all are necessarily imperfect. If we strive for perfection, although we will never achieve it, it means that we have an infinite path, and so there's like a never ending. And that itself is like both a beautiful and I think very clever idea.
Isn't it
But
exciting? Like infinite journey?
oh,
That
absolutely.
you don't get bored
Oh,
ever?
dude. No, oh my gosh. I mean, you may have said that to the wrong person because like that like relates to a bunch of things that are like really important to me. One would be this guy Emmanuel. Have you ever heard of Emmanuel Levinas? This was like
No.
totality infinity. So there was a famous philosopher. So he was Jewish. He wasn't Christian, but he was Abrahamic, and he does specifically speak about like the prophets and like God and like the Ark of the Covenant and all this type of stuff in his writings very prominently. Um, Derrida is another one for me, like a Jewish writer that inspired me. But Levinas basically takes that same conception you're saying about your own imperfection necessarily allowing for an infinite path, this like infinity within a being. And he says that in the same way that like humans have this immediate contact with God in a Cartesian sense is proof that our limited mind containing this infinite concept is itself a miracle and a proof of God. He says that inversely, that's an inherent and like a sort of like a priori intuition that one is both born with and contacts us again through an experience he calls the traumatism of the face. And like I think that like this is like I don't know, I really do think this is like I don't know, I really love this idea. And I may have said this before, but I'm like always repeating this just because I love this idea where he says basically what happens is if he says that there's two horns of conception, one is totality and the other is infinity. So if you are pretentious, if you're prideful, if you're satanic, and he actually sort of relates this to the Nazis because he's going to say like they were the most satanic totalizers. They like made a conception within their own mind that they could like perceive others in like a limited way, that like in the same way that they looked at themselves like literally this is the whole thing. Think about what you just said. You were like, we're necessarily perfect, so there's an infinite journey. Think how beautiful that is, right? The Nazis, they had the exact opposite idea. They thought like we're literally going to perfect ourselves, become a perfect race of Nazis, and then we're going to be done and we're going to be like complete as a machine. And so they limited themselves in the act, in the satanic prideful act, that they thought that they could even do that. Right. And so what Levinas says is that's not the only problem. He says if you think that way about yourself, you immediately become evil because you're not able to see the infinity of others. And he says, like, if you're actually open this, like if your heart like can like see this, what happens is when you see the face of another, and he kind of like literally almost means like a face, but not necessarily like a visually seeing it. Like when you see like a child or like a baby, he says that like basically what happens if you're able to understand that and you're not like that's a machine to be optimized, is it basically like traumatizes you in a good way. He doesn't mean traumatism in a bad way, but he means it in the terms of like the force in which it impacts you. Like when you see a baby, you're like, that's a whole life. And not only is it a life, it's not even like a finite life. Like there's just infinite potential. That's like what you have. Like he says, this is why he says ethics is prior to metaphysics. Like he says, like you don't even like almost like reality doesn't even need to have cohesion for you to be able to like experience that truth. And then when I like think about that in terms of the idea where it's like, oh yeah, like the wisdom of man is like foolishness to God and like all this stuff, and that it's all like I'm like, whoa, that is like actually like a wild idea to me. But yeah, so I think that idea, like you're saying, of like recognizing the infinity within yourself through that like limit, um, of like that like you're imperfect and like you're never going to be perfect and no one will. I think it's not only an important part of recognizing a truth about ourselves, but it's an important part about like recognizing and almost like respecting the like terrible truth that we can understand and experience to a certain extent the suffering of others, and that we have like a responsibility to that. And oh dude, I'm almost getting like emotional because I'm like, dude, yeah, people, that's like the potential
Maybe
people. What's
within
that?
me is an infinite, but I am not the infinite. I'm the one carrying a mirror, and as I peel the onion, I'm uh I'm trying to reflect this mirror with what is. I'm trying to face the mirror is facing the onion, and essentially But it's like double-sided. I'm trying to see my own reflection in a way, and if I do not see this reflection, I just keep on peeling until I do see this reflection, and it keeps going and going until, and it gets unclouded as I keep on going. But then sometimes I forget to do this, and I like the layers because it's an onion and it's actually rooted. I forget to do this in the layers that I peeled off, like new layers grow, and it's sort of I had to like restart. The good thing, it's like there's muscle memory. I could retrace the steps and and unpeel it maybe like faster, like the layers that have regrown back.
Mm. Yeah, and I think it's almost like saying like I think there's a couple different ways I could frame this, but it's almost like if you were to ask the question, how many things would I have to change to be like God? And you might say, well, infinite. Like that, it would just be you would have to like there you would never be done. Like because God, you're not like God, and that doesn't even make sense, right? And so you might say the gap between you and God or you and perfection is infinite, right? And that's not saying that you're the opposite of perfection, but rather just that's what perfection is.
Yeah.
Um, and so you might say that there's um, that like if you were to go on the journey to become perfect, it would be like an infinite journey. But that doesn't mean that you have like the potential to be perfect. It's more
No, you do. You have
yeah.
the potential
Well,
to be
yeah.
perfect, but actually the goal is to strive to perfection, but not to expect to be the perfect because it's infinite. There's infinite amount of real numbers between any two real numbers, no matter how close they are.
This yeah. Ah, man.
And you're right, that when you mentioned faces, right?
Mhm.
When you see someone's face each day, it's always changing. It always takes on new experiences.
Countless.
And all of nature is like that. Everything is changing. Obviously, change is a thing. And it reminds me of the verse in Revelation which says, "Behold, I make all things new." That was always a verse that struck me as pretty interesting. "Behold, I make all things new." So create the idea is that creation is ongoing. Creation is ongoing in every moment. There's always a flowering of experience that occurs in every moment.
Mhm.
And depending on one's capacity to perceive what is going on,
Mhm.
that that determines, you know, the level or the immersion you have into the spiritual life. Because really, all of this stuff is being revealed every single moment around us all the time.
Excuse me. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think actually two things. First off, uh, yes, and even I mean, this is something I feel like I have to admit. Like, sometimes I think like I can't even like I feel like I wouldn't even be able to like talk to you guys if not for like the grace of God if I was in that like perception. Because honestly, I do think about it sometimes, but to even like kind of function normally, I have to kind of just like forget about it. 'Cause it really is intense. Like if I start thinking about it, like of the like spiritual battle and like the necessity, it almost makes me think like, well, it's if like there must be some way I can just die now and like accomplish something good for someone and be done with this terrible battle. But like I don't even know, and that makes me think like I want to do something extreme. But I think you're right. It's a reality, and it's a reality around us, and we can distract ourselves from it, but it's the truth. And what you were saying about like that he makes everything new. I think that is actually a very interesting thing. I mean, for me, like I don't really know anything, right? But like when I did kind of get into the philosophy of time, so like Martin Heidegger's book, The Concept of Time, where it takes like Aristotle's like concept of the asymptote, and like Deleuze's theory of like difference and repetition. like honestly, I think is probably like one of the most like influential. Uh, it's weird because he was kind of like an atheist. He like ended up killing himself, so maybe I was like letting a demon into me. But like I think that is honestly one of the most like influential things I've ever read in terms of like my interpretation of scripture. Because I literally started having dreams where like I was like getting scripture explained to me. Um, like after reading that. So maybe it was like a demon or something. But basically to say like what is newness, what is difference, what is repetition, what is identity? These are going to be like extremely uh like you're talking about like stumbling blocks. I mean, if you're trying to get like really into the nitty gritty, I mean, like I think I've almost heard like nobody bring this type of stuff up except for like a very small group of like extremely esoteric and intelligent philosophers, one of which being Hegel, who's like again one of the OG Christians. So he might have like the greatest take on this. Actually, funny enough, that like cohetes perfectly with like the Trinity and all this. But yeah, and I mean, one of the ways I think about it also, like this concept of like newness and its like relation to responsibility. It's kind of like I don't even think I've seen this movie all the way, but I do think this is actually the best example of kind of what I'm thinking. Have y'all ever, by any chance, seen? There's like a children's movie. I believe it's called like How to Train Your Dragon. Have y'all ever seen this? This may seem random, but
Nope, I have not.
oh, okay. Well, you don't really
I've
need
seen
to, but
I've seen I've seen the Never-Ending Story, but not How to Train Dragons.
oh, boom. That's the beginning of the never-ending story. What's it? No, I forgot it. Laid in the back like a puma on the prowl. The right time to get him is now, Clow. That's the end of that. The beginning of the never-ending story of how he get. Or I can't even remember this. I'm sorry. That's just the rap lyric I like. It's like that's the end of that. The beginning of the never-ending story. I love that. That's like a weird like oxymoron. But because yeah, it's like there's like this poem I love where a guy he's like he says that he's a panther and he kills like the reader of the poem, and then he says that at the moment of killing the reader, it's the beginning of the never-ending story, and then that's actually when the poem starts. Sorry, but basically in How to Train Your Dragon, there's like this the main character, he's like he's like trying to be this sort of Viking like dragon hunter. There's like dragons that live in their world. And so he tells all his like forefathers and like community that he wants to go like kill a dragon for himself and prove himself as this like tough man. And so he has these dreams with these like terrifying dragons and these beasts and all these things like this. And he goes out to finally like slay a dragon for himself. And kind of like one of the key scenes in the movie is basically when he comes face to face with an actual dragon, and where he thinks it's going to be this like terrible beast. It's actually kind of this like adorable like animal, and he sees that it's like hurt, and he can like look into its eyes and see that it's like a whole like being with like consciousness and all this stuff. And so at that moment, he's so sort of like traumatized by this like interaction with the face of another that he decides to like take care of the animal and like train it. And like to me, some weird way, I feel like that's almost kind of like a weirdly like Christian message, because it's like that's like what I feel like we're kind of like called to do as Christians. Is like we're supposed to take this like aggressive, like oh we want to like hate everything and like the world is so terrible and still with like these monsters, and then you like see you're kind of like softened, I guess, and like your heart is like heavy, become like heavy, I guess in like a good way. And what do I know again, right? Take everything I say with a grain of salt and like, please correct me. I don't really know what I'm talking about. This is like my own journey. Um, but it seems like we're all called to like be softened by this like interaction. Um, and then thereby like understand that like responsibility we have and like act towards it, I guess. I don't know, to like all creatures in like the world in general. I don't know. I'm just kind of rambling. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we actually got into some interesting symbolism in the Bible of like before you came on about riding the dragon, you might say, or taming the waters of chaos, um, those types of things, and how they, the waters of chaos, and even the symbolism of the large sea creatures like the giant sea monsters are called good in Genesis. Um, so relating that to the power of God in some way, the potential of God that human beings um, are able to transform that energy into something good.
Yeah, and so is there like sometimes I'm almost like is like how do you God. I don't know. I guess I have some weird idea that like like the way like I guess I've just always had this belief that like the way out is like understanding. And that the way in which I've like been in error is like ignorance. And there's a sense in which I know that that's not true. Like this is one of the reasons I'm an Aristotelian because he disproves Socrates' position on that. Um,
Yeah, exactly. It has to do with understanding, and it has to do with transforming the base passions or sins, as they're called, in Christianity, into something, some type of positive energy. So, for example, the anger that wells up inside of you can be transformed into something good. It can be used to combat the negative aspects within oneself, primarily, like to combat the demons, um, to fight off evil within yourself. And the same thing can be said for pride. Like if you're puffed up within yourself, then you can use that same pride to recognize your own worth and connection to divinity. It can be transformed as well. Like all of these negative portions of ourselves can be transformed, and the intricate psychology by which the early church fathers describe all this stuff is pretty amazing, and it rivals some of the psychology that you find in Buddhist literature or philosophers or whatever.
or academic literature. I'd even throw that out.
Right.
Honestly, I'm pretty critical of modern psychology. Like, and yeah, that's why I guess I turn to spirituality. Um, yeah, and honestly, yeah, yeah, even well, I guess to run to the thing you were saying. So I don't remember them exactly, but I do actually recall when I believe we may have spoken of this like one or more times of um God, you're gonna let me try to remember it just off the top of my head. I know you're gonna be able to correct me. It's something like there's seven. I mean, I was speaking of like four cardinal virtues, and then you told me that there's in the same way that there's seven deadly sins, that there's going to be a inversely seven holy virtues. Um, now I couldn't like tell you what they were exactly, but I remember there was some interesting one where it was like the opposite of or what was it? It was like the opposite of gluttony was like humbleness, but then it was like the opposite of pride. No, it was like the opposite of pride was being humble, but then the opposite of gluttony was like moderation. I don't know. Um,
Yeah, the opposite of gluttony is temperance.
right. That actually makes sense. Yeah.
So just self control.
Dude, yeah, that's dude, I struggle with these so dude, yeah, because dude, even like and that's a problem with gluttony. This is like a Lacanian point where he says, and this I actually brought this up to two Mormons, and I could like I almost felt like they got like nervous when I said this. And then that's because I know they Mormons follow like a false church. That's one of the things where I was like, nah, I want to find like a real like orthodox dude who maybe like he doesn't even have to like explain anything to me, but like I want to like see if he's like kind of like like I don't even know if that's how it works, but it's basically so Lacan says that basically like psychological repression it is itself an inherently healthy function in creating like sinful things which are like basically like necessary for life or like certain like functions or whatever. And so he's going to propose that like the repression of like sexuality itself is a like sexual mechanism. So he's going to say that like the act of like yeah, I mean, like I could elaborate. Like he tells like a whole story in like one of his like decrees, but that is actually I think very funny. Um, but the problem is like it almost like he because his point actually I think kind of makes a lot of sense. Um, in terms of something like sexuality, where I don't think it makes as much sense maybe in terms of the other virtues, which I do think you can actually directly control. It almost seems to indicate that like for well, I think like for things like gluttony maybe as well. No, actually, no. I wouldn't say gluttony actually. Um, um, because I mean, this is sort of true in a sense. So you might say that like someone who like eats constantly would like never enjoy food, and so that like the act of like actually like limiting oneself to in food intake is like a proper element of like actually enjoying that food. And the same would go for things like sexuality and stuff like this. And then this is where they would say like exactly. And so like the proper like the proper like path is like chastity with Christ. And it's to like marry one woman and like only be with her. And then that's where I'm like, yeah, honestly, I do think that is like kind of the truth because that's like what all these dudes say. But I'm like, dang, that is like so brutal. Because honestly, like I've read some of the church fathers, and I forget if it was like I think it was I forget if it was Aquinas or Augustine. But one of them said something like they were like honestly, like if you can't control like your sexuality, it's better to like find a wife than to I guess like if you're able to and it's like healthy. And then they said like but if you can't find a wife and you can't control your sexuality, I think like whether either Augustine or Aquinas actually like instructed sort of like castrating oneself like totally and to become a eunuch like and honestly I think he's kind of right like he's saying like on like it's not that like it's better to like people say like oh it's better like cut off your hand than like let it steal or whatever. I feel like it's like the real analogy there, it's not talking about the hand because that's not the real like I don't without being like graphic um
No,
but I guess
you can cut it off in your mind, like, if you well, when you're younger, it's a lot harder, right? But as you get older, it gets a little bit easier to control your sexual desire. Um, but yeah, if you are yeah, if you can't get married, then best to be single is what, Paul says.
right, yeah,
Best to be celibate, best to be, um, not seeing any woman if you can't get married. Um, and it's not like everyone is gonna follow that path, right? I mean, plenty of people get involved with women and they're not married, and, it's gonna happen.
mm,
But, there are consequences, and, uh, yeah, there are consequences for those things.
exactly. And that like that's like another weird thing like I guess I struggle with because like it like I think like honestly I do kind of think like homosexuality is like evil kind of or I don't know something like that like I understand why it's actually been like taught against and like the same thing with like transgenderism and like not to say that these are necessarily like bad people but like I think we should have like compassion for them because I think they're like mistaken um and even more so I remember like times when I was like a young 20 something year old and I would like think about these like things like a like when I was like a teenager or adult like I'd be like, oh yeah, like these Christian dudes are gonna say like you can never masturbate, like two girls kissing each other is wrong. Like, what are they crazy? The older I get, I'm like, holy moly, yeah, that's like the truth. It's like like as crazy as it sounds, maybe it's like almost impossible for a lot of people to do. It's like I do think it's like the true way of being. It's like yeah, find a wife if you can, and like if you could do that, and like have children. Like a proper way, that's actually good. Like then you can engage in sexuality in a healthy way. But if not, you should just like totally cut it off. And like also like I think like honestly like masturbation is like sin. But, like I like now as an adult, I think I like believe that. And yeah, I think it's like evil and you're like defying yourself. But the problem is like Lacan talks about like this idea of like, well, that actually is a way to just like engage in sexuality in like a greater extent. This is like what Carl Jung talks about with like the shadow, where like if you're not able to like properly integrate that, um, it just makes it worse. And that's where I'm like, boom, that makes the teachings of these like church fathers and like apostles and all this stuff like make even more sense because they're not saying like, oh, well, you can do like some sexual stuff sometimes, just keep it to a minimum. They're saying like just never do it. Give that to God. Like, and I'm like, oh, okay. Because that's the point. Because like I feel like if you like start messing with that, it becomes this like weird cycle, you know? And then it's like this weird thing. And then the people in that need to be like let out of it. I don't even know. See this, but it's like, what do I know, right? Like I'm just like a center, right? So like this is just me trying to like figure out all this stuff. I guess it's okay if you don't have a response to that. I just thought I would like put it out there, see what you thought. In terms of like the virtues and like basically flipping a negative virtue into a positive one. The idea was that like almost they increase each other equally. It's like the kind of like Lacanian idea there, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. The idea is that the energies of God are present in the passions or the things that inspire us. Like all of these things that inspire us can be twisted, and they often are twisted. So figuring them out, navigating the content of our desires, the content of our minds and our hearts is what some of this, I guess you could say, orthodox psychology is talking about.
Mm.
And obviously it's the church like is a support mechanism. It's a place to learn about all this stuff where you go to confession, you participate in the sacraments, you learn, you read scripture. All that stuff is meant to be a healing mechanism. From a Western, Protestant Christian perspective, the church is somewhat of a courtroom, whereas in the East, in the Orthodox Church, it's meant to be more of a hospital. It's meant to be a healing place for your soul, better than therapy.
Mm. Yeah, honestly, I feel. I'm, yeah, honestly, I feel like I'm still kind of like almost like mad at myself because um I think there's only like two times I've really like cried in church. One was like at a Catholic mass, and another time was actually I believe like a couple months ago when I went to an Orthodox church for the first time. Um, and there was no one inside it, uh, but these two like two or three like painters that came in. So the church was empty. Um, and I went in there in like midday and like all the doors were open because there was just like a construction crew inside. And I guess I kind of just like sat in there and I was just like, I guess like crying because I was just like thinking about God and stuff. Um, and then this Orthodox like priest, I guess, he's wearing the whole like black outfit, and he came up and he was like, "Oh, have I seen you before?" And I was like, "No." And he was like, "Oh, well, I have to like go do something for my like daughter or something, but like we're having a feast tonight. You should come and like we can discuss the Lord or something." And I was like, "Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'll try to be there." And I shook his hand and stuff. Um, and then I guess like I kind of like sat around in the church and like sat around in like neighborhoods around there for a couple hours, and I thought uh like honestly I do drugs sometimes, and I have been like a drug addict in the past, and I was thinking like I need to like no, I don't want to like do drugs and like go into the church, so it's like better if I just like stay out here and then like go to my house and like potentially like do drugs and whatever. And then I was just like thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. And I was like, oh, I just want to go to like the supper or whatever. But I was like really hungry. And that's why I need a fast. And this is when I'm like, oh my gosh, oh, I'm such an idiot. Because I'm like, dude, this all made, because they're like, well, we already gave you the answer. It's just supposed to not eat for like a bunch of days all the time. And then it's like being hungry doesn't even matter. And then I'm like, but dang it. Okay, but I'm not supposed to be mad at myself. I'm supposed to just be like, it's fine. Now I follow God. Like, but I didn't go because I went home and then like right before the thing, I was like, I think like even some like chore popped up and like I had to like fix something in my house and then just like all these distractions and I ended up just like doing drugs and then just staying at home. But I was like, man, I really wanted to like talk. Like that's why I went to the Orthodox Church. I was like, I want to talk to one of these like real followers of God and like see like just I want to like speak to him, like look him in his eyes or something. And then like one showed up, like I was alone, but then he was like, I have to leave, you have to come back. I was like, ah, and I didn't. But yeah, so I think should try to go back, I guess. I tried going back one time, and then there was like a mass, and then like I ended up just talking to this like Orthodox guy, and he was like, "Oh, are you into like old stuff?" And I was like, "Well, nah, I'm like I believe in like all this crazy stuff, and I'm like I struggle with like all this like weird stuff." And he's like, "Oh, that's really weird." Um, and then like yeah, I don't know. Like I was like, I don't know. I was like, I felt like even embarrassed like talking to him because I was like, I'm like messed up and like it was just kind of like awkward. But and then like I saw like a priest in there and he was like closing the candles like at night and I was like, oh, can I go talk to him? And then like the guy who's like Orthodox, he was like, oh, what? And he almost like laughed at me. And he was like, no, 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 no. You have to get like in, like you have to get like accepted in. You have to like do this like thing. You have to become like a catechumen. Then you have to get like accepted. Then a bunch of stuff. Then he'll like give you advice. And I was like, well, I'm like Catholic. I've already been like baptized. He's like, I don't think that matters. You still have to do it. And I was like, dang, so I can't like talk to him? And he was like, I don't know, maybe he'll talk to you, but like you're not Orthodox, so. And I was like, ah. And then I just left because I was like, because I was like, that's a problem because I'm like, I like the Catholics, but it's like I don't believe in papal infallibility. But then it's like I go to the Orthodox and I'm like, I want to talk to these dudes, and they're like, oh yeah, well you have to do the whole like sign up and like this whole thing, and then I'm like, no, but I feel like that's wrong. Like I feel like an Orthodox priest that they would definitely talk to me. I don't know. Maybe I think I just maybe went to a wrong. Uh, I mean, I don't know if there are like bad Orthodox churches. Like I don't know if that makes sense, but uh, I don't know.
No,
Like if there's any particular ones I should go to, or like any way
yeah,
you
there
think I
could
should maybe
be.
go about that.
I would be put off as well if I went to the church and I tried to talk to the priest and someone turned me away from that. So I completely understand that. I certainly didn't experience that when I went, to the Orthodox church that I visited for the first time. Priest came up to me, no problem. So maybe it was just, the place you visited. Um, but I would say if you do want to meet with a priest, maybe call the church or email beforehand and just let them know you're coming by and you want to talk to them.
That's actually a
Um,
great idea. Why have I
yeah,
not thought of that before? Thank you. I'm gonna actually make a note of that right now. Thank you for
yeah.
saying that. But go on. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
And I when what I did was I emailed the priest after I went there. I just went to an Orthodox church. I had been bouncing around a couple of churches at the time. I went to a Protestant one, Episcopalian church actually, and then I went to a Church of Christ, which was really weird. Um, and then I went to a Catholic church because I had been hanging around Catholic friends at the time. Um, and that was cool, but it didn't really capture me. And then I eventually went to an Orthodox church because I found one in my area. Um, when I went there, it stuck with me. Something about it stuck with me. And then it took about 6 years for me to go back. Took six years after that initial encounter. And at that point, I started emailing a priest, and he agreed to meet me at a coffee shop. So we met at coffee shops. I brought books with me. I had a lot of philosophical arguments. Had a lot of things from Buddhism that I wanted to discuss with him. Um,
Mm.
and he sat there patiently and listened to me while I had piles of books in front of me. So
If I may ask, do you remember any of the books you brought out of curiosity? Or just if you remember like one or two, I'd be curious what you're hitting them with. I just imagine a stack of books that's like so high, it's like blocking your face, and he's just listening.
yeah,
No, but it doesn't matter, you know. But yeah, and then so what do
it
you
was
do?
books on philosophy. It was books on Buddhism, and I even brought some books on occultism with me because I had been
Ooh.
exposed to occultism in my past. Um, so I came from a pretty diverse background, um, and I had fully gone into the Buddhist tradition as well. You know, I had taken the three vows.
Mm. Oh wow.
Yeah, I had been involved in Buddhism for years before I got involved in Christianity.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, I remember you speaking of this. It's a very interesting story. I didn't know that there was a 6 year gap in between the first time you went and this return. And I know that the priest ended up saying that something like that he couldn't like explain it to you, and that it was like a journey between like you and God or something like this, and that you would have to just do it yourself, and that he's not going to be able to be like, well, basically the philosophical argument is like it'd be funny. So I know he wasn't a Hegelian. Hegelians would be like, no, 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 no. We're gonna be here for 9 hours. We're
no,
just,
this
I'm just kidding.
this guy that I was meeting with at the coffee shop, he recommended me to a deacon, which was a different guy who was actually homeless, and he was a deacon at the church, and he lived in a car outside the church in the parking lot. And this was a guy who had spent a considerable amount of time in Japan and had been a translator of Sanskrit, Japanese writings, like Japanese spiritual writings. And
Whoa.
my priest told me to go talk to this guy who was hanging out in the parking lot. And I did that. And I spoke with him on several occasions. And basically, after the second conversation, when I was bringing up Buddhist ideas to him, he looked at me very intently in the eyes and he said, I can no longer speak to you about this. My journey in the Orthodox Church has been so personal that it is not possible to go any further in this conversation with you. So he basically shut me down. And that conversation changed me. It really had an effect on me in a positive way. He was basically saying that, you know, this whole thing is so experiential that we're not going to talk about it anymore. You're just going to experience it.
It's the grumbling moves some like demons. I mean, that's like frustrated with that. Like, "Ah, just blah, 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 blah." Like, I don't know, but like, uh I guess, yeah. I mean, I'm almost like at a loss for words because there's nothing about that I could actually deny. Um, like I think if someone said that to me, I would almost just like agree with them because I would actually say that like I don't know, maybe this is like a false conception I have, but I do almost have this like conception like so do you, like I mean it's like a really long like weird I guess like chain of arguments I've like built up in my head, but like I just believe, like, I guess to put it simply, I mean, this is the thing of like what I mean with like the word of God. It's like the word of God speaks into creation, and then like we get God like through the written word, right? And then it's like but then like what is experience? Like we're always experiencing like a narrative in our head, I guess. Um, but I don't know. I mean, I guess I struggle because some part of me maybe like I have some like false conception, but I almost think like any rational perception, by it being a perception and by it being rational, is like thereby inherently like transmittable. But I guess like I think there's an inherent sense in which like there's like we were talking about like infinity. I think there is like an infinity there. Um, so I guess I don't know. I guess I'm trying to like I guess I'm just trying to share this like kind of like really weird way in which like I struggle with that because I think there is an element of that can I think guide me, and I want that story to like guide me, and I want that story to like give me as much of like peace and like positive impact as it's given you. um and uh yeah, like I don't know. I mean, this comes from like a weird like kind of like I guess like obsession I developed from a young age, which was that like I had this belief that like I could basically explain anything, like describe like anything I could like understand, I could like describe or like explain in some way, maybe not like perfectly. And there's a sense in which I still kind of believe that. Um, uh, and even more so, it also makes me think of this like Zizekian thing, where it's like like I wonder if like in the act of him actually like putting off like a potential explanation, this is actually like the thing which brings you the closest to God. It's that like separation from him, like kind of ironically. Um, because I mean like maybe this is like an evil thought, so like forgive me if I say this, and like please like correct me if I do, because I think you're like more, I think you're like a more holy powerful Christian, so like if I say any like evil things, like you can like destroy it or whatever, like please. um but like sometimes I guess like sometimes I wonder, like I hear this voice in my head and I'll say something like when I hear that story I honestly think like, well, what if he had actually like attempted to describe his experience, and that he even did kind of describe it, that then upon hearing that you actually never become orthodox, or it actually like ironically like leads you away from the church, because you're like, oh, that's actually not perfect, that's not this, or that's not like what I wanted. But it's in him actually not giving that to you that we let's say the same thing with totality and infinity. Like you put off this infinity because you don't know what it is, so you thereby like leave like an infinite path between like you and God, and like this infinite personal path, which is not ever like contained by the totality of like any potential description he could have given you. But not to say that, I don't know, honestly maybe this is just all like just crazy rambling, I'm sorry. um I guess I'm just trying to parse out like kind of some way to like get a positive impact from that story, I guess. Maybe I'm overcomplicating it. uh, I shouldn't have said that, I don't believe in that.
Yeah, it was, it was personally impactful for me, but uh, certainly wouldn't expect everyone to go through that. God gives us experiences as we need it, and I'm sure that God is curtailing your life right now to exactly how you need it. We're not
Crazy.
we're not like a cookie cutter spiritual experience here, and um, as far as um, so you were saying about um, you know if he would have described everything to you, right? um,
Mhm.
um, when you think about the story of Moses, right, the way that he approached the burning bush when he first got knowledge of God, when that initial knowledge that he had of God, The prerequisite for him approaching the bush was him removing his sandals. God told him that the ground upon which he was standing was holy. So the prerequisite to any kind of spiritual experience or knowledge or communion with God is to remove one's sandals internally. It means to take on an aspect of humility. It means to approach every situation in life as if you were approaching holy ground. You see people go around and they throw trash on the ground, or they have no care in the world. They have no sense that they're walking around in a place that is holy. They have no sense of spirit. That's what you don't want. You you want to be aware, you want to be conscious that you're operating within a world, within a realm that God is present everywhere, all around you, and filling you.
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. And honestly, it's like I mean, screw it. I'll just share it because I like it. I don't know. Y'all you have the wisdom like judge this or whatever. Um, and I don't know what this means, but so I I didn't have the worst like childhood, I guess, but I also didn't necessarily have the best one. So I had a lot of like weird experiences, and honestly, like I started doing LSD when I was 15 years old, I believe. Um, and I think I did it like 40, like 60 times, like from like 15 to like 17, I guess, which was like way too young to do that. And like I would never recommend that to anyone. I think it's like a terrible idea. I was like a stupid teenager, like irresponsible parents. But um, there would be these times where I would be like a little teenager and I would do LSD in my bedroom. And there was this one time where, and sometimes I think I'm like, cause it's like through drugs, this probably was like kind of corrupted, or maybe even what is just like full on like a presence of a demon or something. But I wonder if maybe there is some like little nugget of truth in this, where there was this one time I took like a massive amount of LSD, and as strange as it sounds, I decided to go to bed, and I was like, I'm just gonna like take a nap and then like wake up and be like very high on LSD, and I laid in my bed, and then I was like, well, I could if only I could just fall asleep. But there's just this little light in my room I need to turn off. And it was at that moment I realized that there was no light in my room. And as crazy as it sounds, I like turned on a lamp, and it seemed as if my room was illuminated by candlelight. And what washed over me was this just it's hard to describe. It was both like terrific and terrible at the same time. But I guess to kind of crudely put it, it did feel as if uh I was like in the presence of God somehow, or that God was like in my room, that He had always been, but that He was there right now, and I was aware of it. And when I was thinking of this, I was looking at the floor of my room, and what I noticed is that I had not vacuumed or cleaned in a decent amount of time, and so there were these little particles of like food and little bits of dirt. And I could see these little bits of dirt, which normally would never disturb me. Like if I just saw a little like bit of dirt on my carpet, I'd just be like, okay, whatever, I don't care, right? But now I'm sitting here and I'm like washed with this like intense feeling of like that I'm disgusted with myself because it's like that like I was thinking like, wow, I'm like this is the creator of the universe, this is the most perfect being. He's like given me a room. Like he could have made me sleep outside. He could have made me sleep in the hole. He could have killed me. He could have tortured me, but he gave me this room and like I have like a place to live. And he gave me a floor, this beautiful soft floor. And what have I done? I've let it become dirty. I've let my living place become dirty. I've let myself become dirty. I'm dirty, and now I'm dirty in the presence of God. And it was like just the contrast of like my own filth with like the purity of God was just this incredibly like I was literally like just like kind of like laying like almost like face down like crying and like grabbing and pulling at my stomach because my stomach was like I was getting it was like making me sick. um Now maybe I was just like very intoxicated on LSD and tripping, right? Just like a dumb 50-year-old. But and then also I think like well like I guess you're supposed to feel like peace in front of God, and then also like I know you can't really like see God. Like I didn't see God. It was merely like I felt his like awareness. It was like oh like God is like I know that he's paying it like and so by paying attention he like that's his like presence I guess. Um, but I don't know. So that probably was like corrupted because I do believe in like Peter 5:8, stay sober and vigilant. And I don't support drugs, but I don't know. That is one thing that kind of like sticks with me. Or like where people say like, yeah, you're supposed to like remove your sandals and like you want to be like clean in front of God. And like we were talking about like these ideas of like purity, cleanliness, water. Um, and I think it almost relates like a little bit to like our responsibility, like what it means to be like clean in front of God is to like follow his promises. And like that like cleanliness and dirtiness almost like refers to a state of one's being in relation to their either success or failure to deal with those responsibilities. In conclusion, so but so thank you for letting me share that little story. But
Oh
I don't
yeah,
know if anyone
that
doesn't.
sounds like a genuine experience. Sounds like a genuine experience, and yeah, oftentimes the information that we can bring back from those drug-induced experiences can be quite spiritual, but sometimes it's hard to ground them when you come back in reality. Trust me, I've had my fair share as well. Um, but yeah, it's sounds like you've had some genuine experiences. You know, though it's important to just continue to pursue them in a way that is outside of those drug experiences, and just through prayer. Really, the quieting of the mind is the best resource that we have to get to that place. It's very difficult to achieve a state of mental silence, but that's what the Hesychiast tradition, in Orthodoxy talks about. And really, that's what prayer is all about, is um, the the descent from the mind into the heart requires some degree of mental silence. It requires some ability, some internal self-control of the mind to allow that to happen.
Dude, see, I think like honestly, um, I've done that in terms of like Buddhist meditation a little bit, where like I sit down and try to like quiet things, but it's always this like weird thing, and then I end up getting like kind of that thing. But I think I had maybe one of my first almost like experiences with that, like consciously attempting to do it, actually yesterday, where I do honestly kind of like live in almost like a perpetual state of like dissociation where like I'm just constantly trying to like there was a time especially like a year ago or a year or two ago when I was like very academic and I'd go on long walks and I'd like sit in the quiet and like all this type of stuff and I like pray and all this, but now it's just like constant like podcasts, music, like audiobooks. Like it's just I like have to have like something, and even more so, I'm like always like in my head. Like I'm all like it just literally the point where like I feel like I don't even like interact with my like physical environment. Like it's almost like through some like screen. Like even when I like walk around my like house and like do chores, it's like I'm just like in my mind. Like I'm not even like there. And like I was like I was like trying to like pray a little bit to God, and then I was thinking I tried to just have that like peace, and I was like, let me just like try to like experience things directly like I used to, and then I did it and it was calm, but then immediately it's like meditating, but just like it was also like active meditation a little bit. There's just like that immediate like repulsion back. I was like, oh my gosh, this is insane. I was like, holy shoot, like dudes do this all the time. I don't know. I've like thought about this before, but like At first, when I thought about it, I thought it was kind of funny, but then the more I thought about it, I was like, wow, that is genuinely like an amazing accomplishment to almost like never think. Because for me, that is almost like an alien world. Like that's all like not like because I like live in my mind. And then like that's one of the reasons why I think I'm like, I don't know, like I almost feel like maybe a Christian metaphor is like sometimes I feel like I'm like an imp. My mind and my body is like an empty house, and like all these like creatures and thoughts just like flow in and out of it, and I just let like sexual, evil, wonderful, like all these like crazy thoughts. I just let them like flow through my head, and it's like because I'm just always like spiraling through thoughts, they just kind of like swim and like fly through. They're like squatters or something, and then I'll be like, ah, yeah, and then I like get caught up in a thought, and then that's one of the reasons why I get so angry because I like take my thoughts to like be myself, and then I'm just like, and then this is the point, and blah blah blah, and I'm like making a point, and the point is like me. But then it's like, nah, that's like I honestly sometimes I think I'm like, what if that is like some weird type of like possession or something? Because then I hear these like orthodox dudes, and they'll be like, nah, you're supposed to just like be like, it's 6:02 p.m. I'm sitting here eating dinner, and then just like be like, I love God, and then like that's it. You're not supposed to just be like spiraling through this like insanity of like culture and ideas of blah blah blah, blah and this and that, and then the fighting and the war and the bullying, the culture was technology was always just like that weird. Um,
Yeah, to pray is definitely to not dissociate. You know, one is definitely embodied through the senses. You know, during prayer, you sense everything around you, but you know when information comes in, I guess you could say it's filtered in some way. You're standing watch, standing guard over the gates of your thoughts, and whatever comes in that might potentially disturb you, you just kind of disregard it, you know. But you're still fully engaged in the environment. You're fully embodied. You're fully aware through your senses. You're aware of everything around you, but you're seeing God instead of the information from the world. And it doesn't mean that you can't take in information. Like, you know, I learn things every day. I look up things. I learn things, but um, I certainly don't pay attention to the news or politics or anything that might distract me from my purpose in life.
yeah, and I guess that's where I struggle because honestly, I think I am like the older and older I get, the more I think I'm like almost a victim of that. Like you can't serve two masters, and I think I'm almost like and that's the problem because I think like what happens is like I guess if you try to serve two masters, you just end up serving the devil or whatever. Um, and I think like because honestly, sometimes in my head it is like honestly one of the best descriptions I think I've ever heard of it was Freud's take of the um like interaction of the life drive and the death drive where and like the pleasure principle and all this where um and I think that's the that would actually be one of the reasons why like heaven being infinite is actually like necessary for like solving this almost like psychological paradigm. Um, but it's basically like the idea is like you want to maximize pleasure. And it's you're going to be like an inherent like purpose for like all humanity. But then Freud's also going to postulate that like what it means to be alive is to like be made up of these like cells which contain this like inherent energy which wants to like disperse to a zero state. It's not really important, but he basically says that like what that ends up turning into is like these two functions. One being like the sexual drive, which is going to say that like it negates like oneself, but in order to also like continue oneself infinitely through like a legacy of reproduction. And so in the act of like the sexual drive, you kind of never die. It's like a form of like crude um like attempt at like extending the pleasure principle like infinitely. Um, but the other function is going to be like the death drive, which is going to like basically be like a result of the reality principle, where you kind of like recognize that like you aren't going to be able to experience infinite pleasure, and so in the act of sort of like balancing. um, that like current pleasure for some later pleasure in order to actually extend it. So you say like, well, I want to experience like the most amount of pleasure. So what's the way to do that? Well, it's actually to like sometimes put off pleasure because you can't experience pleasure all the time. Well, maybe you can never experience pleasure, right? So like this is kind of like what the reality principle is doing as opposed to the pleasure principle, which kind of tells you to like ceaselessly feed yourself. And so the reality principle actually gets formed in this thing of like the death drive, where like not only do you like understand that like things are limited, but you actually like desire for things to like become that way. Like you desire to like die and you desire to like have everything just like be destroyed and like end in its like ultimate like final state of like returning to nature. Um, and so the idea would be like, well, what is the purpose? Like, what is the purpose for like anyone? What's the purpose for like us? Well, I mean, like for me, I guess like in some ways, I think like, well, I want to like extend the pleasure in my life. And I think I do that not in a hedonistic sense, but through like well-being. And so if I were to do it through well-being, not through a hedonistic sense, it's like, well, what's the most perfect life to live? Well, it's like an ultimately Christian life. But then sometimes I think like, well, I'm not going to be able to accomplish that, and like I'll probably go to hell, and like I'm going to fail, and like even if it is the truth, like I'm going to turn away from it, and like I don't know, and like that's my fault, and like God did that to like show some other person. And then that's another thing I think this is okay. This is actually like super random, but this is something I want to bring up. This is a thought I have actually a lot, and it's like really weird to explain, but it honestly makes me like struggle with Christianity because I feel like everyone who's like a Christian, they think in the same way they're like not prideful. It's like I don't know. It's like you like being a Christian, y'all think y'all are like the winning team, and then y'all are. But then sometimes I think I'm like, well, it seems that God has almost like set up this like whole battle, and He wants you to like choose, and like He wants there to be like evil people, and He doesn't want them to turn against Him, but He gives them that option for the sake of a greater good. But in doing so, they actually like serve His plan. And so I feel like I almost like fall into this weird like demonic like Christian position where I'm like, well, yeah, I believe in God, like I believe in Jesus, and I believe in like these teachings to a certain extent, but like I also think like I'm probably gonna fail, and like that's like the point because like I'm like, and this is like an insane thought, but it's like I'm not the main character. I'm not one of these saints. Like I'm not like one of these guys. And then it seems like there's all these like elements in the Bible where it's like, yeah, well you're the good guy, and then all the people who turn away, those evil people, that's all still part of God's plan. They're fulfilling something, but they're just like on the bad side. And then that's where I think I'm like, yeah, I've like never been like the main guy. I'm probably like like I'm gonna like try to be good, but like I feel like I'm just gonna like end up accomplishing God's
No,
plan, like an
every
inverse, you
single
know?
one of us, every single one of us is the prodigal son. Every single one of us is the sheep that has gone astray in the Bible. Every single parable that describes Israel that has turned away from God, um, that's all of us. We're not meant to be perfect, my
Mhm,
brother in humanity.
mhm,
We are we have all gone astray.
mhm,
Um, you find the symbolism all throughout the Bible. And every single time that it refers to a Pharisee or someone that is in the wrong, guess what? It's us. It's us. It's not them. It's us. And God is talking to us. He's telling us how to get back to him. And the primary parable in the gospels is the prodigal son, right? He's the one that went away from the family, and he squandered his uh, his money. Um, and when he came back, he was completely destitute. But the father took him in, ran to him, and hugged him, and welcomed him back into his home. And that's the case with every one of us. God, we are all cast out from God, like every single one of us. Doesn't matter who you are.
mhm.
But We are called back to him even at the 11th hour, even at the last moment of our lives, even when we're in the most dire places, we are called back to the feast, to sit at the table with God and partake of the feast. And what is the feast? The feast is eternal life. You were talking about the concepts of life and death. The real
Hmm?
feast is eternal life. And, that's one thing that the Christians talk about, of course. They um, believe in this, regeneration of a human spirit into eternal life. So that's very important as well. But the the notion that we have to be perfect, that's definitely not true. The Christ came to heal the sinners. Christ came to heal the sick, not the ones who are already there.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, you're so right. See, this is why I'm bringing this stuff up to you because you're like, oh yeah, remember the prodigal son? Like we've all turned away, and like God's showing us how to get back. And even more so, I think it's kind of interesting. You're talking about eternal life. Um, I think if you like, this is one of the reasons. Like, so many of these things seem to just point back to Christianity in so many different ways. But like, I used to be really into psychology, and I really like Freud's system, and even if you followed Freud's system, like in a pure atheistic sense, like you were like, I don't believe in God or anything, but you believed in Freud's like model of the mind, um, even as an atheist, this is like a hard thing to explain. You could actually like almost like para scientifically reason that like what like in a even in like a purely psychological way which would have an actual effect. By believing in eternal life, you're like under the Freudian system, you're actually like fundamentally changing the way your entire like psychological machine functions. And that would be really important because basically he says that like that machine is the way you actually like accomplish like tasks, like whether they're hard, difficult, pleasurable, whatever. It's like what you accomplish is going to be both allowed and limited by like uh basically like your reality principle's ability to like make a sort of like exchange with this pleasure principle. But if you basically chop the pleasure principle, I mean, maybe this is like technical, so you'll like it at the end, maybe, but hopefully, but basically, like you chop the pleasure principle out of your own life. So you say like, I don't care about any pleasure that I'm going to experience in my own life. I'm just going to look forward to like the pleasure of heaven. You fundamentally change the way you make decisions. And that's going to be actually like very useful because whereas before you're almost trapped in this like hedonistic thing where you're like, oh, well, I'm going to die one day. So I have to kind of like be bad or evil or like make these compromises here and here because I want to experience this pleasure like before I die. You can actually like throw all of that away. And then now you have a psychological mechanism which literally allows you to potentially accomplish any task because you're no longer like limited by like, oh, well, I have to experience like this pleasure in my life or whatever. You just go, I'm going to follow God. I'm going to follow Jesus. The pleasure will be after my life. You can like torture me or whatever. Like, that's it. And like through that, you could almost like parascientifically reason, as crazy as it sounds, like as like an atheist, you could say like, therefore a Christian can do all things through Christ. Like even as an atheist, I think you could form almost like a psychological method is how that like literally would actually, and that's not even just in your head because that would have an actual causal output of like this person. If you look at people as a machine, this is like a bad way to do it, just scientifically as a thought experiment. You'd say that this machine is now like unlocked like a new function, which a sort of like almost it's almost like the general. I forget. Yeah, that's what it's called, right? The general, like the thing which, like a cruise control, like the pleasure principle is like a lock that people have in their heads. But if you can believe in heaven and eternal life, you basically like take that speed limit off, and then like now you can basically accomplish like it. You would be willing to like go endure any suffering because like there's this infinite reward after. It's almost like a Hobbes or oh, what's it called? I'm blanking on it. What's the thing where it's like, oh well, hell is infinitely bad, heaven is infinitely good. Pascal's wager. Yeah, it's like a little bit of like a Pascal's wager, if that makes any sense. Where it's like there's no reason not to do it, so you can like do anything now. I don't know. Maybe I just think that's a cool idea. It kind of points to Christianity. Even if you're an atheist, I'd be like, ooh, 1-0 Christianity. It's just because they would have to like maybe concede if they were like a pure Freudian. But I don't know.
Like He-Man. I have the power.
Oh
He-Man.
yeah, with a sword. Yeah.
The
The sword of justice.
masters of the universe.
That's exactly how I look in real life, by the way. That's what I want you to imagine. No, I'm just kidding. I don't look anything like that. That would be
All right.
sick.
Well, good conversation, my friend. I'm gonna start heading to bed.
Oh yeah, I think it's getting late for me, so I should go to bed as well. But I want to genuinely, if I may say two things real quick. First off, honestly, no excuses, but honestly, I was kind of struggling with some stuff when I first came in here. It's not an excuse. I do think I was like more aggressive than I liked, and I want to recognize that I was wrong, like kind of confess to that sin, and also I want to say like your kindness does honestly in some weird way like almost like touch me, like when you're like I did feel your like sternness, like you were like, hey, like chill out. You kind of just came in here and were like being aggressive. But like honestly, sometimes when you tell me to calm down, like other almost like anyone else, when they tell me like calm down, it like just like I'm gonna kill you. But when you say it, it like genuinely, I'm like man, it like kind of like softens me. I'm like yeah, like I'm like I'm being like cruel here. Like I'm sorry, and I don't. And I recognize that, and so I want to like, I guess like commend you for your like stability and compassion, and like always. And also to say like I appreciate like you all of the insightful things you said like after that with like the prodigal son and like understanding like prayer and like standing before the noose. And so I heeded all that. And I know that's a lot, so you don't have to respond to all that because it is late. So I'm gonna be going to bed as well. But I guess I wanted to like confess that sin, commend you for calling me out on it. Please continue to do so if I fall, because I will again, not intentionally, but like I'm just human. And also to thank you for all the things you said about Noose, Prodigal Son, and advice on like prayer, so on and so on. And yeah, thank you for letting me be here, even though I messed up, and that's no excuse. But I just want to say that. So thank you, and I hope you have a good night.
Thank
But
you
yeah,
as well, brother. Thank you as well. Talk to you soon. Good night.
yeah, good night.
Good night.
Yeah.